So this H1B visa thing is huge. I did a video on it on my personal channel, which is just my name, nothing exciting, and it blew up. It got 1.5 thousand views, more than any video on this channel. And shockingly enough, right, it's got lots of great comments, a few poorly informed people with bad logic, but mostly very positive stuff. So I wanted to jump in on this opportunity to demonstrate something very important about the world that's more relevant to this channel, to navigating patterns, using this example. And I think by the end of the video, you'll see it quite clearly. So this H1B visa thing is a pretty complex topic overall. And I'm going to try to give you a list of the things that sort of I know. There may be a better list on my personal channel, but it's from a much different perspective, right? That channel is mostly for me ranting about computers and how pissed off I am that my beautiful industry is taken away and has been destroyed. And this list may not be exhaustive, right? I'm not trying to be complete. I'm trying to be as complete as I can be. And, it might not seem that I'm being complete, but, maybe I'm being a little bit more complete than you realize. Because I'm going to demonstrate how complexity emerges from complication, right, and perspective. And so a lot of things that will seem linked together at first, I'm going to pull them apart. And then I'll link them differently later, perhaps, and maybe I'll miss a few things, I don't know. And I'll try to show you why this is so confusing, an issue, not only an issue like this, but how to break it down and how to think about it, because most people are sort of thinking about it incorrectly. And how you can be right about something, but not right enough, right? Or not right for the right reasons. And why that is. Like, I don't want to impugn people's honor or anything, but a lot of people are missing a lot of things because of this issue. Is this combination of complication and a bunch of perspectives, and that just creates a bunch more things, right? And so let's see if we can understand how we end up with so many different views on what seems to be the same issue, right? Namely H1B visa. And I know Sam Hyde had a great video on this, actually, but it's a little flat, right? He's really accounting for outcomes primarily, but not really recognizing where things come from. Like, what's the source of these outcomes? How do we get these outcomes? Is everybody talking about outcomes completely differently, or looking at completely different outcomes dishonest? Or what? Like, because it's not helpful if you don't understand where it comes from, because it creates more splitting, which is what we're seeing, right? This is all a split. And then, is the split deliberate? Is it a psyop? Like, who knows? So let's break this down the best way I know how. We'll start with sort of the complication end of the spectrum here, and sort of a quick overview of this H1B. So it's for specialty occupations, right? That's the terminology used. So people with degrees, right, or what's called a fashion model of prominence, very fancy jargon, right? Which is a status, which is basically to say, things like actors, right? Actor, you can't get a bachelor's in acting, right? Or at least you couldn't before. I mean, who knows what they're giving degrees out for now? They're probably giving degrees out for cup making. At this point, I don't have a cup making degree, but the team and I have made a cup. I don't know what that means, but maybe there's an acting degree now or something. There certainly wasn't before. So it would be a specialty occupation. So you could hire a contractor to do that, or a full-time worker to do that, right, under this visa. There's other things. Most of this, to be fair, is not used for entertainment. It's used for science, right? Or technology or engineering, things that maybe are pre-degree. Like, there's one guy who knows how to do this. There's no degree in it. How do we measure that? Oh, we just have this fashion model of prominence. And so it's stipulated right in the bill, in the original bill, it shouldn't impact salaries. It's not supposed to impact salaries. That's what it says. It's already built in, right? But like, how do you do such a thing, right? It's just the government being stupid and saying, "Oh, really? This is our intention." It's like, okay, uh, lots of people have lots of intentions, and that's what the road to hell is paved with, apparently. So I don't know what to tell you about your intention, stated in your bill in words. And then if you look, there's a cap to the number of applicants, right? Except if they were US educated, not US born, not US citizens, not US residents. If they were merely educated in the US, they came here on an education visa, gave way too much money to our education system to go to MIT or Harvard or wherever, right? They do not fall under H1B. In that, they don't fall under the restrictions. They can still apply for an H1B visa. They get fast-tracked right in, and we're done. Because we educated them, so they must be wicked smart. Problem solved. Okay? Also, if they're employed at a school of higher education or an associated nonprofit to one of those schools, you notice almost all those schools have partnerships with overseas schools, right? So I knew a couple people, they went to college at specific, say, smaller colleges and universities because they had an associated school in England and they could go to England and study for a year over there. A very good friend of mine did that, in fact. I tried to visit her over there. England threw me out. It's a long story. If you want to see that video, comment. Maybe I'll do a video on that. I'm still angry, and I still think we should bomb England for it. Plus, they owe me a lot of money, especially if you count the interest on my flight. So that cap's not there. And if they're part of a government research organization, our government does a lot of research with overseas governments, including, for example, all the marijuana research in the US is actually done in Israel right now at a single lab. I know everybody tells you they don't do research on drugs. Our government's doing research on drugs since the 20s. There's no year in which there aren't white papers on drug use and drug effects from labs, research labs, and high-end schools. So don't believe that lie. But those people are not limited by H1B. They can apply for an H1B. They can come here and work under H1B, but they're not limited. They're not in the set of people that if you go past that number, it's 65,000, by the way, you're not let in, right? So H1B does not limit the number of people from, to 65,000 because 5,000 people with exemptions could easily come in after they reach the cap. Okay? This is a complicated bill. It's not a simple bill. Right? So it's important to know because there's problems right from the go, right? And then in 2019, we had like 583,000, a little bit more workers. You can only let in the 65,000 per year, right? So what's the discrepancy? Oh, well, if they were already here, you're not part of the cap. So it's not like you can only ever have 65,000 H1B workers in the United States at a time. That's only how many they let in per year. Do you see the problem here? This is how you get 583,000 in 2019. And what's a specialty? It requires a bachelor's degree or higher by US standards. And the job has to stipulate that it's for bachelor's degree or higher. So if you're short on workers of any kind, you can just start listing the job as requires a bachelor's degree or higher. You have to say what kind, because that's not in there. And then the school has to reach or meet the US standards. Okay, but we brag all the time that we have the best higher education system in the world, and people come here for that, also probably to bypass the H1B number, right, and still get H1B status. Isn't that a neat trick? As stated earlier, well, if we have the best schools, then probably no one meets our standard, or not many of them, right? Um, and this standard has to be common through the industry, right? So the industry has to agree, you know, yeah, pretty much all the workers of this class or in this type of a job have to have a bachelor's degree. Uh, and the job has to be so complex or unique, it can't be performed without a degree. Okay, I don't know any jobs like that at all. I'll challenge anybody that I guarantee you I can do your job without a degree. I guarantee it, like 100%. There's no question about it in my mind. I'll prove it to you if you wish. You got to pay for it, but like I'll show you. I'll definitely show you that. I don't have a degree in anything. I've never taken a college course in my life. I guarantee you there's no job you have that I can't do. But look, it's okay. You can be accepted with equivalent work experience. So you don't even need a foreign bachelor's degree. That's what that means. You get equivalent work experience. If somebody puts on a piece of paper, they work for a company doing this job for 10 years, you now qualify under H1B status. It's a standard without an enforcement mechanism. And it ends up that the enforcement is done by people who are swayed by whoever president is. So if the president makes an offhand remark, boy, I don't know about how many H1B visa people we're letting in here, the number of H1B visa people coming in goes down automatically with no change to anything written or any laws or anything. This has happened. It's been measured. It's noted in the research that I looked up. You can look it up too if you don't believe me. That's fine. Feel free to look it up. So that's interesting. It's interesting. So it doesn't have an enforceable standard. It's not something you can like point to and say, aha, this is the standard. Every single standard in that bill is undermined by other sentences in the bill. It's a complicated bill. Now, let's move to this matter of different perspectives. Okay? And show how this complexity happens, like how it emerges, right? So we've already gone over this bill's complex. There's lots of moving parts. There's lots of imperfections. There's loopholes all over the place, and there's exemptions, and there's a few oddities, right? And so let's suppose, for example, that you're a worker in India. And what you see is, oh, there's this H1B visa thing, and it's an opportunity to get in the US, right, for a job, make a fortune, because 80K a year US is a fortune anywhere else in the world practically, right, with a few exceptions. And perhaps you have to sacrifice being with your family for a year or 2 or 3, right? Or maybe, you're building up your cash to have a family, right? And so it's a small sacrifice of time, right? Where when you're in this country, you don't really want to do much of the country anyway, for the most part, right? I mean, there are some exceptions. They're notable for sure. I know about them. I was in Boston. I understand these things. Lots of foreigners, lots of temporary foreigners, right? But for the most part, they don't engage with the culture here. They really don't. They just kind of pretend they're still in India, and they form their little cliques. And there's nothing. I have nothing against that. That's fine. I know lots of Indians have been in the computer industry over 35 years. Believe me, I know a lot of Indians. They have given me wonderful handcrafted items from India, in fact, in the 90s. So there you go. I had that elephant a very long time. Now, these people can work. They're used to working a lot more than your average US citizen is. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them, maybe not even most of the ones I know, ironically enough, come from poverty or relative poverty, right? They're not in the upper class. A lot of the ones I know were in the upper class. Long story. But they don't mind working hard because the US is kind of known for the harder you work, the more money you make. And generally speaking, that's true. That's true, generally speaking. It shows up in all the numbers. You look at any set of numbers, you'll see it. It's true relative in the world, right? 40 hours seems to be the sweet spot for working. That's why Europe fails, or one of the reasons. Um, we could argue work-life balance doesn't work out well for Europe, as it turns out, because if you're not spending that work-life balance on certain particular things, your country's going to fall apart anyway for other reasons. So this 40 hours is important. And the fact that they're willing to put in more than 40 hours, and Jordan Peterson talked about this, right? 45 hours gets you something ridiculous, like a 20% improvement in outcomes. It's 5 extra hours. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a linear relationship. That's true. It's not linear all the way down either. 35 hours is not, whatever percentage of hours that is less in salary than 40. It's much worse, right? So again, 40 is the sweet spot. It's this nice balancing point. When you go above that, things get a lot better. When you go below that, things get a lot worse very fast. Okay? So there's fewer distractions for the people coming here. And if your goal is to make money and better your situation in life, either directly through money or through the prestige of going back to your country and saying, I worked in America. I was there with the best, most productive people in the world making a difference. When you come back, you're going to be worth more. I don't know. It's not a bad deal for them. And you're going to live in America, where, at least for a while, right, while you're working here, where your standard of American poverty is above many countries' standard of middle class. And we don't appreciate that because we're Americans and we're not well versed in other parts of the world. But that's a fact. You can talk to them about this. They will tell you. They told me, for example. I don't know why this is a secret. Talking to people helps. It helps a lot. Listening to people, I should say. Listening to people helps a lot. So this is a huge upgrade for you on all fronts as the Indian worker. Now, perhaps you're an Indian and you have a family and you want to move because India's got issues. Right? A lot of corruption, a lot of bribery, a lot of cheating. You're in a low caste, right? You were born into a low caste. Your family's not well thought of for any number of reasons, whatever. It doesn't matter. There's dozens of reasons. Talk to people who live in India or lived in India. They'll let you know. Being in the U.S. increases your chances of being allowed to stay. It just does, right? Greater chances of being able to immigrate here, especially if you're considered special and part of the needed workforce. So, you won't be living in the best conditions for an American, but again, it's likely a huge upgrade on all fronts for you. And plus, you'll have a pile of cash either way. 80K a year is a lot of money if you live in the right parts of the US. You're going to make some sacrifices to do that. Maybe you have a longer commute or something, but it's still a lot of money. And if money is your primary goal, then what difference does it make, right? I mean, my very early first job as a software engineer, right? And I was also tech support and I was the tech writer because I was the only person in that company, although the building had 3 companies in it, all owned by the same person. That commute was 1.5 hours to get in and 2 hours to get home every day, plus an 8-hour workday. You make these sacrifices for the prestige. I was making slightly over minimum wage, but I didn't care. It was my first job as a software engineer, and I didn't have a degree. So, it served me well. Indians, far more willing to do that than Americans are. Now, let's suppose you're an executive in India, and you realize it's an opportunity to have a consulting firm, connect people who want to go to the US somehow and get this prestige somehow, and who otherwise don't have access, right? Like maybe they don't even know about H1B visa. You can get them there through a consulting firm, right? And then take a small cut. Everyone's happy. Like everybody wins. This is a no-lose situation. This is not one person preying on another, right? Everybody gets something out of the equation. And, maybe in some cases they're taking advantage, but maybe in many cases they're not. And maybe even when they're taking advantage, it's still a good deal. I don't know. These are much harder things to work out than you think. From the perspective of this executive, though, the entire US market becomes open to his company, right? He can showcase his talent. I can tell you people from all countries are very proud of their best and brightest, or whoever they think is their best and brightest, or even their average citizen. And they want to showcase them to the world. It's an ego thing. The Americans are like that too. Not a big deal. But look, maybe that executive can set up an office, right? It makes it easier to do this H1B visa thing. It makes it more legitimate to potential employers, right? Do you want to pick the guy, the consulting firm strictly in India? Do you want to pick the one that, there's an office, right? So it's got potential, right? And it's not all like me make money as executive. Some of it is generally like, let's help the people. Maybe they crawled out of the caste system and, into the rising merchant class in India or equivalent, and they want to do the same for their cousins, right, or their fellow family members. That's very big in India, by the way, and other countries too, but in India it's a real big thing. So let's move on to the perspective of the US worker. He's gone into debt to get a bachelor's degree in whatever hot field, or bigger, right, a better degree than bachelor's, with lots of jobs, because he was told that it was a hot field and that he would get training and that there would be jobs. Like, that's what he was told, right? And now there are more workers being let in, right? This is bad. More workers means more competition, and more competition inevitably lowers salaries. Right? It's a supply and demand problem. That's never going away. Supply and demand is just a real relationship of reality in the real world. It's not an optional thing. It's not something you can bend or break. Maybe you can find, quote, exceptions to it. Maybe that's what you think, and maybe that's not really there. And maybe there are just exceptions to everything, and they're rare, and they're not this case. And it might seem to you to be unfair to be lured into paying for this degree and then getting more competition with people who settle for less money, because it's not less money to them. It's only less money to you, where your cost of living is higher and your expected standard of living is among the highest in the world, if not the highest in the world, right? And, oh, by the way, all of those numbers of what's going to be hot in 5 years are projections. They're all based on old data. Just the fact of the matter. Now, on to the sort of US executive class. Their perspective. They look at the numbers, right? More bachelor's degrees equals more skilled workers. Now, they don't care how the bachelor's degrees happen, right? But maybe they notice, boy, bachelor's degrees out of a lot of these schools, we don't get the best. To know what's going on in the schools, but maybe we're just not getting the best. And, maybe a few of them know that, more degrees doesn't equal skilled workers, right? But more overall, people with degrees equals more possibility to find somebody who's decent, who actually knows what they're doing in that field. Just, it's a numbers thing, right? It's a math problem at that point. It's inevitable. And plus, these people from outside are much more motivated to get access to the US than the people who are already here. Like, I'm already here. I'm not motivated to get access to the US at all. I have access to the US, right? So they just have an additional non-monetary incentive to be here and to do well. So equally educated people, one with additional motivations, is almost certainly going to outperform one who doesn't have those same motivations. Sorry, that's just the way the world works. I don't know. And plus, these people are willing to work more hours for the same pay, basically. Or maybe they'll work more hours for less pay. And maybe I can buy them through an agency that's funneling them in from India. That's not bad. That gives me a little bit of cover. And look, it's cheaper to test out these people to see if they're talented. Because everyone thinks they're talented, right? And everybody thinks you can convey talent by education, which is certainly not the case. And so the same issue of just because you have a bachelor's degree doesn't mean you're worthy, right? Or worth anything. exists with the US workers, just as it does with the Indian workers. You just don't know if the ratio is any different because you're an executive. You don't have time to figure these things out. And who's measuring this stuff anyway? I don't know. I look out over the sea of programmers and I say, yeah, all these people need to be fired. All of them. They're all terrible. I don't know what's going on, right? I'm just structuring my industry. And so, look, other executives, before you pushed this bill to have this, to give this opportunity to the corporations and also to the people of India, the poor people of India. I can help the poor people of India get a better life. The federal government is encouraging me. And all these other people are also motivated to make this happen. And it seems to be better for my business. Why not take advantage of it? Otherwise, you as an executive are at a competitive disadvantage to the rest of your competition. I'm sorry. That's just the way it's going to be viewed, whether that's right or not. I'm talking about perspectives. I'm not talking about some objective material reality. That doesn't exist. See this video. Hopefully that'll straighten it out. So let's look at this sort of from the government perspective, shall we? So businesses are complaining to them that there's a lack of skill in the workforce. They can't get somebody they like. It could be like a misalignment, right? Like, oh, we have a bunch of people who are trained in chemistry, but actually we have too many chemists. But you know what? We have too few programmers. Right? That things like that actually happened, right? Or it could be a problem with universities falling behind on teaching. Right? They're just like, oh, you're just not teaching people in the subjects that we want at the rate that we need or the rate that we project that we need, because the government is in the projection business. Of course, the government does everything poorly, including that. Everybody's getting their numbers from the government, pretty much. Right. Including foreign countries. Right. Explains a lot. But it could be any number of things. However, access to a larger population of people fixes it, no matter what the cause. It definitely fixes it. And the companies are doing all the vetting, right? And presumably they're going to work in their own best interest because companies are perfect and they never make mistakes and they know what their best interest is and they know how to measure it. Unless you've ever worked at a company, you realize none of that is even remotely true. It's a low cost to the government, though, and they get to solve or not the problem. At least appear they've solved the problem. They've given somebody what they wanted anyway. And where's the downside for the government? If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, then the companies are actually not worse off. That's true. No downside for the government. So what happens when all this complexity and all these perspectives combine? Well, you have a bunch of effects, direct effects, and side effects. That's the issue. One thing you have is a feedback loop. H1B implies that we do not have enough bachelor's degrees in whatever fields. College comes up with a way to fill that need. Now, they can be running off government numbers. They could be running off forums that they've run with CEOs, because they do that. Colleges get together with CEOs, right? Sometimes CEOs run the forums and try to get the college people in to say, hey, we need these skills. What are these? What degrees fill these requirements? They do this. Like colleges and businesses talk, and universities talk at a very high level sometimes that you're not even aware of, right? And what do? They start more courses and they recruit more people for them because they believe they're helping the corporations, or they believe they're filling a government mandate or a government related need. That's what they do. That's what they should do, by the way. Like, yes, they should do that, right? But that's mostly driven by other forces. Now, are there some people that are just in it for the money? Sure, but it's probably not as many as you think. It's not all of them, that's for sure. It's not the majority of them either, by the way. I was in Boston. I know a lot about this. I could tell you which colleges should be shut down immediately and everybody arrested. Nobody wants to do that, though, so I'm not going to waste my time. But But if the FBI wants to call me up, I'll just tell them, nope, these guys are corrupt. I know people in the industry. They've told me flat out, stories are horrible. You should just close the place down and arrest everybody. That exists for sure. It's just not the majority, right? It's not MIT. It's not Harvard. Got other reasons why I want to shut those schools down, maybe. But it's not due to corruption or people being greedy. None of that is the case there. It really isn't. But the side effect of getting more people in your college is more money. And especially if the government, because they think the reasons for H1B are valid, also is trying to pay or cover the expenses of more US people getting into schools, because it doesn't apply for the H1B people at all. Oh, well, we want to keep the H1Bs at bay. So we better start educating the US kids more. Well, they can't afford it. So we better dump more money into that system. You see how this works? So H1Bs drives up the cost of college in the US for reasons which are actually counterintuitive if you think about it. But that has to happen because you've already bought into the H1B need. It's already there. That's what the H1B is for. All the lawmakers have agreed, to the extent that they passed a law, which is kind of a lot of agreement in the US, let's face it, right? Real lot of agreement to get a bill passed in this country, right? So it's not the college's fault that they're going to benefit from this quite a bit. And of course, the government dumps more money into something, the cost goes up, right? Especially when they make it so that you have to pay it. You can't even declare bankruptcy, which wasn't always the case. Might want to look up the dates on that, who was in charge and what happened. Might be a little shocking. And then there's this whole thing about filters and layers and how you apply your skills to this problem. So if you're Elon Musk, and I don't know Elon Musk, I've done some video, at least one video on him, right? I don't know Elon Musk. I've never met him. Could be that he's good at finding talent. Good executives that run good companies are almost always good at finding talent, because you know what one skill you need and is sufficient? Finding talent. Steve Jobs, very good at finding talent. Total jerk to work for. Horrifically bad business decisions in many cases. Came very close to bankrupting a number of the companies he touched for bad business decisions that he just dug in on. But the talented people would pull him out of it, because he was very good at finding talent. If you're good at finding talent, the fact that you're bringing in more people just looks to you like you have more talented people coming in as the result of the program. That's what you see. You don't see anything else. You don't see all the dumbasses you didn't hire who got jobs elsewhere, for example, and screwed up every piece of software they ever touched. I'm not going to name names. I don't remember them all. There were quite a few. But it works. H1B works as designed from your perspective. And if you're Elon Musk, you probably pay those people over market rate because you are getting talented people. Now, what that doesn't mean is that you could have found an equivalent level of talent that was educated in the US. Why? Because you're dealing with a larger set of people. It's that simple. Larger number, right? If you have a larger number here to choose from and a smaller number here to choose from, these people aren't going to get chosen as often because there aren't as many that qualify. It's that simple. It's not a conspiracy. It's a limitation of mathematics. It's just the way the world is. You got 1.5 billion people in India, and you have how many? 350 million here. It's kind of a David and Goliath situation where David can't win because they're looking at numbers. They're not looking at nationality. Now, if you wanted them to look at the nation, now you have all kinds of problems, right? Now they're ethno-nationalists. So the H1B seems like a good diversity play to me, and it seems virtuous. Now, I don't like the H1B system. I think it should be done away with immediately for lots of reasons. One, it fails in its goal. I think every goal listed in the H1B, it fails at, unequivocally fails at. Does that mean it can't ever benefit anybody? No, of course not. It mathematically will benefit people who can filter for talent. Now, what else happens? What are the other effects that arises from the complexity of taking this complicated system, right, which is actually part of a more complicated system, part of the immigration system, right? It's an exemption to the immigration system to allow for workers. I'm not against that, by the way. Migrant farm workers, best idea we ever had. Let's keep doing that. It benefits everybody. It's the same situation, right? It's mostly poor people from Mexico and South America coming up here for seasonal work and going back home with a lot of money. And they don't mind making the sacrifice for their family. They spend most of their time back at home anyway. It's not a big deal. It works great. Does it work in the tech industry? No, not at all, for exactly the same reasons. It's not temporary. It's not seasonal employment, right? They're spending all of their time here while they're working. It just doesn't work the same way. So I'm not saying no worker visas. No, I think worker visas are great in certain industries under certain conditions. They're just not great under any other conditions, right? Very specific. So what other things that happen is when the people are here, because they're valuable or perceived as valuable, they're more likely to be able to stay here. There's lots of incentive for companies in India to keep them here. And everybody wins. No one's being taken advantage of necessarily, although I got my questions about large Indian consulting firms. But actually everybody pretty much seems to do pretty well. So no shade on them ultimately. But there's certainly cases where they definitely could do better. And that's the problem. Everybody could do better here for sure. But when they're here and they want to stay, they can stay. Now, they're not, the people coming on work visas largely are not coming for the same motivation as other people migrating to the US. Other people migrating to the US, for the most part, are really want to be American. And that's the thing. They want to be part of our country. They don't want money so they can go back to their country, or they can send half of it back home and live better while they're here, even if they're away from family and have to work really hard. And maybe it's not really hard to them. Maybe they're actually kind of on vacation because they're used to working a lot harder at home. Because that is the case for a lot of these H1B people. I've spoken to a bunch of them. Like, I know them, right? Like, this is not an imaginary thing, right? I've been in the trenches with these people. And look, some of the H1B people are super smart. They deserve everything they get here. I get that. They could have come in on the normal immigration system, though. Really, there's already a mechanism for this. There's no reason for this H1B nonsense. None. And again, if you want talented people here, you want them to move here. But you do not want them to move here for money. That is the one thing you don't want. Everyone whines about how greedy the US is. Well, let's not let in more greedy people. How do you do that, Mark? You filter them out. Do you want to come here for money to make a big salary? Or do you want to come here because you believe in the virtues and values of the United States? And that's the problem. How do you understand America? It's a good question. Is it a group of people that live in a geographical place? Is it folks who believe and agree with the government and the policies of the government and the laws of the United States, or maybe the statements in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights? Or is it those who share the same set of, quote, ideals? Could go on about what that is, right? Based around what? Freedom, self-governance, opportunity, right? Or is it a cultural designation? So you can see how H1B is tied into because it is an exemption, effectively, in the immigration system. It's tied into how you understand America and what your goals are. And this is where Sam Hyde is right in his video. I really actually had a hard time watching his video, by the way, but it's a good video, and you should try to stomach it if you can. So close. It's so far away. This level of complexity from the complication and the perspectives, when they collide, I can't do it justice for sure. But you can see where all these second order effects come from. If you're letting a bunch of greedy people into the country, you're making consumerism worse. And if they don't want to be part of our culture and they just form their own, you're causing a splitting within the United States. I'm not saying that's necessarily bad or anything. I'm just saying that's happening. I'm not going to judge it. I don't need to judge it. You can judge it for yourself. I really don't care. That's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to show you this is not an easy thing. Everyone's take is actually incorrect. They're just flat out wrong. Okay? I'm not saying I've given you a take that's more correct. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is everybody can be telling the truth. Everybody can be seeing things clearly. And there's a bunch of things they don't see that are also true. And that means you could get 7 people. They could give you 7 true statements about this H1B visa thing. They could all be perfectly accurate, true, and correct, but they're all incomplete. And when you don't consider the whole picture, then you have a problem. And that is more what Sam Hyde's video is about. We're not considering the whole picture, and therefore we have a problem. But demonizing people based on their perspective, when they're just not aware, they're ignorant, in other words, of what's going on, is not helpful. Right? It's not going to make things better because you're just splitting. You're causing these groups to split. And then people go, well, why are we splitting? I know, it's a psyop. It's not a psyop. It's not a conspiracy. I have several videos on conspiracy. I'll link one here on the channel. Just check one out. It's not a conspiracy. Okay? Different people see different things in the world. And when something complicated comes along that they have to look at, complexity everywhere. And it's just hard to work out. And that's no one's fault. That's the way the world is. And I'm sorry the world is that way. But I did not make the world. Elon Musk did not make the world. Trump did not make the world. Sam Hyde did not make the world. Together, we do not make the world. We may form part of it because we're in it and we are part of it, but that doesn't mean we made it because it was here before all of us. So what I'm trying to do is give you a sense for the fact that this is hard. The people in the government didn't see this coming. I'm sure of it. The people in the industry still think it's a good idea. And not because they're greedy. Some of them are. Some of them think it's a good idea because it's a small number of people. I assure you, it's absolutely a small number of people. No excuse for it, guaranteed. Identify those people and go after them for being greedy. Sure. If you can. I don't know that you can. If you can. But don't demonize Elon Musk. I don't even like Elon Musk. But I understand his perspective. And he's not wrong from his perspective. He's just ignorant about the side effects. And that's why I thought the Sam Hyde video was brilliant, because he kind of points that out. Right? And it's hard to understand all the multiple perspectives. I'm not claiming to have covered them all. And man, this is what I do. And I have a hard time with this. What do you think people who don't focus on this full time, Elon Musk doesn't focus on this at all. He just sees H1B, goes, oh, seems like a good idea, works on paper. Here's all the research to back up that it's a good idea, because that research exists, by the way. Let's take advantage of it. Of course, as a businessman, you should. The government's telling you it's good. Other businesses are benefiting from it. Well, yeah. How's that his fault? What's he going to do? Stop everything? And instead of researching rockets and how to get to Mars and how to make better electric cars, he's going to focus on all the trivialities of H1B so he understands all the loopholes and all the ways in which it's terrible and the fact that government is awful every time it does anything. Like, he's not going to do that. And I don't blame him. I don't think he should have to do that. I don't think he should try to do that. I think he should focus on what he's best at. And that's really the problem. Don't let this split everybody apart. This is a solvable problem. We could just get rid of H1B tomorrow. We could do it. Wouldn't be that hard. We have to tell the right people the right things. We have to show them the right pieces of information and explain to them the side effects, which they're unaware of. We could do that, though. If you want to do that, you should do that. If you need some help, let me know. Check out my video on my personal channel, which is just my name. I'll link it in the description if you want. And maybe that'll help. I don't know. I don't know why it got so many views. I hope this one gets half as many views. That would be amazing. But look, this is hard, which is why I'm trying to explain to everybody how limited they are. Everybody's limited. Elon Musk is limited. Trump is limited. All these wicked smart people are limited. They only see tiny slivers of the world. IQ 300 wouldn't make a difference. Your perspective limits you. Your experience is limited. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. And most of all, the thing that's most limiting of you is the thing I value the most, which is really your time and attention.